Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. Let's go to sea today, shall we? In fact, let's go some really exciting place like Antarctica. Well, I don't think I can actually leave my room, but we can go there vicariously through the adventures of two people who are setting up a business to make it possible for travelers like you and me and other interested environmentalists to visit the part of the world where there are lots of whales, or rather, where there used to be a lot of whales. We've killed most of them off. And that actually turns out to be a very serious matter. But we're going to get into that right away. In Tampa, Florida, is Jenn Bonilla. Do you pronounce it Bonilla?
Yes, that's right.
Bonilla, Dr. Jenn Bonilla, at something like the Moffitt Cancer Center, where she works some of the time, but she has another role because she and Hugo Hindrichsen have started up a new company called Positive Polar. And that is what we're going to talk about mostly. Their plans for taking excursions into waters where there were whales and trying to help you and me compensate for the lack of these whales with some of the material that we produce that I presume is supposedly similar to the things that the whales are famous for producing. Poop. Right? So,
Yeah.
hello, Jenn, and hello, Hugo. Say hi to.
Hi, very nice
Hi,
to be
great
here.
to be here.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
the invitation.
Yeah.
Okay, Jenn, I want you to start off and tell us the game plan. I'm thrilled. I'm never going to go out on a cruise again, but the idea behind it is intriguing.
Yeah, sure. Happy to tell you about Positive Polar. Positive Polar is a scientific expedition cruise company. So we're science first because of the vision that really Hugo had to really marry something very important needed in the world, and that is the opportunity and the need to move certain science forward to restore our oceans, to restore the wildlife and biodiversity in the sea, and to fund that work with paying passengers on cruise ships. And this enables a sustainable approach, sustainable business model so that we can really move the critical science forward. So I'm excited to work with Hugo. I'm the president of Positive Polar, and my background is in now almost 3 decades of biotech experience and really advancing science to develop and deliver products that serve the world. And I'm excited to get to do that in this area.
Well, now that's interesting that you and Hugo found some common ground because I think, you've been working in, I guess, in the business end of the pharmaceutical industry, deciding which startups to fund with new treatments for cancer and so on. It's a wonderful job, but quite far from what you're doing now. And Hugo tells me that he has, for 35 years or so, been involved with sailing, and his whole family has a background as sailors. So, where was that, Hugo? Where did your family live as sailers?
But it's okay. Yeah, 25 years sailing. Well, it comes from a really exodus that did happen in the years 18, in the middle of the 19th century, in the south part of Denmark. They were whaling in the North Sea, and the whales that just stopped to be there. And they did migrate to America, to US and Chile, for continue whaling. Chile was very famous on that years for whaling, so they did migrate to these places, to USA, because where the ships were going, right, and also to Chile, where the actual action was happening. So yeah, and then we obviously then the job changed. and my father was a Navy officer from Chile, and also became a Navy officer. And because of that, I did have the lack of grow in Patagonia. Not too many people in Chile grow as a child there, because almost all of the population in Chile is in the central part, and where the weather is like California. But I did grow in the southern part, that the weather is like Alaska. So that gave me the opportunity to see the dramatic changes that was happening there into the landscape. In really a few years, it was so obvious that the glaciers were melting and really retreating a lot. So I'm also an engineer. I'm a naval aviator. So I did saw everything from on top, flying my helicopter, also sailing. So it was so obvious that something was happening, and my childs didn't enjoy the winter as I did. For example, in one of the cities there called Punta Arenas, it was supposed to be, as a child, you wait for the winter, right? You are waiting for because it's a party, the snow, you go ice skating and everything. And my child that didn't get that because it was most of the time raining, and the lagoons didn't froze anymore. So that's why I decided to do something about it. I started researching, and that is where the fusion of knowledge between the science and the sailing part get together. Yeah.
Ooh. Okay, well, I'm eager to hear about the whaling part, because I've done several different shows before talking about whales and and the way they have contributed to maintaining the climate, the whole planetary climate, the oceans. Very important. So, Jenn, I think maybe you want to give us an overview of why we should care and why we should worry about having decimated the world's supply of whales.
Well, certainly it was the case, as Hugo described with his own ancestors. Whales were a very important part of human progress, right? Their oil lit lamps and really drove the industries forward. And we're grateful in that sense for all the great contribution that those animals made and the people who went out and harvested those whales. What we didn't know at the time, though, and now we understand, is that we removed so many so fast that they could not repopulate, and it left a really big gap in the ocean's natural processes for how it controls our climate and how it feeds the base of the food chain, all the fish in the sea. So this is not something people understood in the past, but now we do know this. Science has shown us this. And whales are very important, not just because they're so amazing to spend time with, very charismatic, and I've been chasing whales since 2011. I'm crazy for whales and traveled the world for many years just chasing whales. But then I got to learn more in the past few years as science has revealed that actually whales are critical for mixing nutrients in the sea, such that literally their poop and urine at the top of the sea where they poop and pee, it actually feeds little plants called phytoplankton, which end up being the base of the food chain. So whales feed deep in the sea and they come up to the surface to breathe. They also come up to the surface to poop, and that poop mixes again with the nutrients and the sunlight, and you end up with these beautiful plants, just like you would put fertilizer in your garden and grow a garden. So the ocean needs that. It needs its whales, and we removed so many. We're missing 90% of the largest whales, the blue whales. 90% are still missing from what should be there. It's incredible to think about, and 70% of all other types of whales combined. So that's a huge gap. That's not like a little bit of missing whales, that's a lot. And at the same time that those whales are missing and slowly repopulating, but their gestation periods are quite long and they continue to face threats from ship strikes and otherwise. So it takes some time to bring them back. We're missing this important cycling in the ocean. So this is something we understand, and that's why we're excited to think about how we can support this natural ecosystem process by biomimicking what should be there as the whales continue to repopulate.
Well, one of the other things that I think is relevant, I don't know, I don't think you can make up for that with your expeditions, but I understand that one of the big problems about climate change is that the ocean becomes more stratified. That is, the top layer and the lower layers do not mix as much as they should. So we need more upwelling, or we need something to stir up the oceans, because there's serious consequences for the future if we don't. And the whales were the main factors handling that in the past. They constantly go up and down and stir the water. And with hundreds of those big, enormous critters in the ocean, or thousands of them, I don't know how many there were, that was a major factor. And I don't know whether there's any mechanical substitute that can be introduced for that, but it would certainly be something worth thinking about if you could, I don't know. Anyway, so, but the beauty of it is the wonderful poop. And I've seen, interesting videos and documentaries and so on about the extraordinary importance of the materials that these animals make at the top of the ocean when they excrete. And that this is so, its quantity is just staggering. It's really amazing. And it's tell us more about what happens with that poop, and and how it relates to the all important phytoplankton blooms.
There are some tech that's been explored for artificial upwelling. So again, when we think about positive polar, we're very focused in our initial approach as a company around biomimicking whales and whale poop, and Hugo will say more about that. But we're also very open as a platform for other technologies to be explored, to be studied, and certainly artificial upwelling continues to be a very important aspect of that. You noted it perfectly, Meta.
Well, I will tell you, I already have a suggestion for you in addition to your whale mimicry. But let's get to that later, because I have a thought. But Hugo, maybe you can explain more about the phytoplankton and why that is so crucial.
Yeah, well, as Jenn did explain, the phytoplankton is the base of the food chain in all of the seas, right? But right now there's less and less phytoplankton. And we are measuring phytoplankton, and we are in a really big trouble, because it feeds everything. It feeds the zooplankton, the krill, the fish, and everything. And that's why the fishers are catching less and less fish. My father is a captain of a factory ship in the Chilean waters, in the Humboldt Current. The Humboldt Current produces 1/5 of all of the fish in the world that is consumed in the world, and right now is suffering because of the lack of phytoplankton. So it's just an example of how important this could be. So we need to restart what was happening before. And what was happening before was this circulation of nutrients that was produced by the whales in what we call the whale highways, and really in all over the world, because there's some species that like the sperm whale that are the more efficient ones, because they feed deep in the sea, particularly with the species that are very easy for humans to relay with iron, because they have ink. These giant squids have ink. This octopus has ink, so they eat these giant squids, and then they poop that they cannot assimilate the ink. So, and the ink is full of iron, and they poop that, and that iron is the one that feed the phytoplankton. And we stop almost all of that, because 90% of the sperm whales are out of the ocean. and that is what we are going to help restart, because when we start this technology and we license this technology, we hope that almost all of the ships will be able to mimic and become a mechanical wheel that will produce more food for the whales. And finally, we are going to help them to restore their population and also restore the ocean wildlife that we are seeing less and less in the world. And that's the positive news, that we are going to help the nature to restore itself.
Mhm.
Because the nature will always restore itself, but we need to restore posture, right? Because we are suffering the consequences as humans. So that is what we are going to do. Yeah.
Okay, well, I do a lot of other shows, and my favorite, I guess, numerically, the ones I've done most about have to do with climate change. So I've done a lot of shows about people in which experts talk about a number of different technological solutions to climate change, and one that I think maybe, I guess I shouldn't take sides and say what is my favorite, but what I think is very realistic has to do with the fact that there are large areas of the oceans that are deserts where the phytoplankton do not exist or are so sparse that the fishes have nothing to eat, and therefore there's little light wildlife or fishery or other seafood animals in the ocean. So large parts of the ocean have gone really into debt.
Yes.
And the solution to that is pretty simple, at least a good part of it, and that is simply put some iron back in the ocean, a very tiny amount, but you sprinkle the iron, and the phytoplankton will grow because the phytoplankton can't grow without it. And then when you have the phytoplankton regrowing, then this creates habitat for fish and everything else. But the beautiful thing about from the climate change point of view, it is about the phytoplankton, which are plants, of course, is that they do the thing that all other plants do, which is they absorb carbon dioxide. And so, of course, if fish eat them, fine. But some of these little plants, microscopic oftentimes plants, fall to the bottom of the ocean and sequester the carbon dioxide that they have removed from the atmosphere. Therefore, carbon dioxide removal is a very important side effect of phytoplankton, and therefore,
Yes.
there have been experiments showing that yes, you can go around and sprinkle just a tiny bit of iron, and that will do the trick. In fact, it was done experimentally by a bunch of different people and is well known to work. But there's a lot of opposition to that. People are afraid, oh my goodness, we don't know what the side effects would be. People say this is geoengineering and we don't want anything like that because my goodness, what might happen, we don't know. So, there are lots of opponents to this. But there's nobody that I know that is opposed to whales.
Exactly.
So if you have a lot of enemies who try to obstruct other technological solutions, then just propose to them, well, all we're trying to do is restore the kinds of excretion to the surface of the ocean that the whales used to provide. And that is, of course, one of the reasons of our current problem. So we got to replace that. Is that the game plan?
Exactly. So, Jenn, do you want to
Well, I
talk,
was going to
please?
say, I really like how you framed it. Thank you, Meta. I wanted to go back a little bit. One of the things that really strikes me, as you were saying, desert, a deep blue or blue ocean is not a healthy ocean. The ocean should look more blue-green. Okay, so sometimes when you're out in the ocean, if you've been out into the Southern Ocean expedition cruising, and you see this deep gray blue, that's not an ocean full of life. Okay, and so that's one thing to keep in mind. Our blue planet should actually be a little more blue-green.
Mhm.
And we can see that change, but the NASA satellites, to Hugo's point, it's recognized that when we lose phytoplankton, it's a very serious threat to humanity. And that's why there's literally a satellite launched from NASA that does nothing but look at phytoplankton, the base satellite.
Mhm.
It's that important to humanity. So we know that phytoplankton has declined by 40% or more since pre-industrial times. 40% is a big number. It has real knock-on consequences into the sea on top of what we did with removing whales during that time. So we've just given lots of hits to the ocean in that sense, right? Absolutely. It seems like the evidence would suggest that adding iron could be helpful. And the report from the National Science, Engineering, and Medicine report from 2022 and currently being updated would also suggest that. But there are real unanswered questions about that. We have to be thoughtful. So indeed, let's start with something that is more biologically relevant, because it is true that there's no one out in the world just, naturally putting there's iron in the ocean. Why don't we start with something biologically relevant to the ocean, and that is whale poop. Whale poop is not just iron. It is heavily iron in some parts of the sea, but it also depends on where the whale is feeding and what they're eating, and the nutrients that they're putting up aren't always the same things. It's a different proportional mix as you go along the ocean, along the whale highways, which is through the world, as you know. So our suggestion is to start with something that's natural for the ocean, mimic what we see in the whale poop. Whales poop at the surface, so you can actually sample it. It's knowable what it is. You can do the biochemical analysis and know what's in that whale poop in that part of the ocean.
I've seen photos of the quantity of this stuff.
Have you never seen whale poop out in the ocean? Sometimes you'll be in a ship and it'll just look like red, and that was a whale there that pooped.
Yeah.
You can take samples of that, you can test it, and you can mimic it. You can create something that looks like that and put more of it there. But now you're doing something that is natural, that should be there. It should just be there in bigger quantities. And we don't want to just do that. We want to do that under protocol and measurement so that we all learn, like, really what happens and what's important, so that, to Hugo's point, if it actually is helpful, we can scale it. And if it's not helpful, we understand why it's not helpful, and maybe we shouldn't be doing it at all, or maybe we do it with adjustments. But the idea is to move the research forward. It's kind of stuck in labs right now, and it needs to be out there in the ocean where we can really understand and maybe be helpful to the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I have cruises, and I actually felt very guilty about it because I didn't at the time. I thought I was doing something good. I was trying to avoid flying, so I took a cruise thinking that I was going to be emitting less carbon that way than I was by flying, but it turns out I was wrong. In those days, those 20, 30 years ago, the ships were emitting some really toxic types of, or using toxic kinds of fuel and emitting a lot of carbon. However, I that stuck in my mind, the notion that cruises are really, really harmful. In fact, I would have been sort of in favor of banning them because people don't have to go on cruises, and they shouldn't be putting fouling up the planet with more CO2 than they need to. But as I understand it, the kinds of fuels now have changed for the better in some respects, but not in other respects. But at any rate, one can maybe consider the possibility that there's a good side effect of taking a cruise if you use this as an opportunity to collect the people poop, as well as the garbage that is left over from cooking these elaborate meals that they always serve, and spreading that out as a substitute for a whale poop. And that idea, it had never occurred to me, but it strikes me as a wonderful idea if it will work. So please convince me that human poop is as beneficial to the ocean as whale poop.
Yeah, exactly. You are talking a very good point. Me coming from a family of sailors, I kind of tired of being considered a polluter, right? just because doing what I like to do, what I have been always do. So I go into a ship, and just for being there sailing, I'm considered a polluter. Really, that is what I want to change. I want to change because this I think that is a much healthy society, society dedicated to the sea. The sea is something that connects all of us. And what you said is really striking my heart. People thinking of banning cruises, really. So it's what I like most, to be on the sea, and there are people like thinking of really put a ban into that. So this solution will make a total change into the not only into the environment, also into the psychological effects of humans, because humans right now will be better for the environment if they go sailing, right? And if they cruise, so more cruises applying our technology will be better for the environment, and specifically sailing, hopefully where whales should be. So that is a huge change. And why we think that we think that is possible, because we know the input, right? We know the what how the human waste look like. We know the food waste, how it is, right? And we know the output. And with little tweaks, we can transform that into what should consider artificial whale feces, right? Maybe, and only doing some minor modifications to the already existing waste treatment units. So that is what we are planning to do. Maybe we will need some more space, yes, because there's some minerals, as to Jenn's point, there's some minerals that humans don't produce, right? And we will have to add something, but to that mixture, right? And you will need some space, but that space that you will use in the ship will be compensated with all of the positive benefits that all of the ships are going to start doing into the ocean, right? So it's not going to be also something positive for the environment. It's also going to be something economically positive for the companies that will adopt this technology, because we are convinced, we are business people, we are convinced that all of the environmental science or applications should have an economical benefit. If you don't have that, you are just talking about ideals, and not all of the people have all the same ideals, right? So as you can see in the US right now, so that's why it's so important to make this economically viable, and that is what we are going to do with our technology.
Okay, now I
hope that I can convince you.
You're going to sell to people the regular cruise, is so people to have their vacation, going on a cruise into largely Antarctic waters, there's cold waters where there should be a lot of whales, and you're going to do research finding out what kind of ingredients are in these whale poops and what kind of ingredients are in the excretions that come from the inhabitants of the ship, and as well as, I gather, food waste. So I want you to talk about that. But are you doing the kind of chemical analysis would then allow you to say, this is the kind of composition that we want to put into the water to substitute for the whale poop, because we know that this is exactly the kind of mixture of stuff that the phytoplankton need. Can you do that kind of research on board a ship, or do you just take stuff home for labs to study, in on land?
I think it's a important question to say exactly how the split of work will happen on the ship or not. But think about it from the standpoint of on land, there are laboratories in the United States and elsewhere that are very skilled and very safe related to dealing, we're having this difficult conversation with human feces, and really understand how to manage that, because that is considered a biohazard. It contains bacteria, could contain viruses, could contain lots of things, right? So it's very important to handle human feces appropriately for everyone's safety, but also to understand its biochemical composition vis-a-vis the whale feces composition, which has its own mixture of nutrients and bacteria. We all have nice, healthy guts, I hope, at our different species, but we're all eating different things, and we obviously live in very different environments. So you will not expect these things to be a one-to-one match. For example, as Hugo pointed out, the whales are going to have a lot more iron. They're going to have a lot more phosphorus and nitrogen, and humans are going to have nitrogen, but we're going to have bacteria and fats and some other things. And so the idea is to do this comparative analysis on land. We do understand the two things separately. There is plenty of scientific data, including that by Dr. Matt Savoca, who we've worked with, who recently published a paper in January of this year in Nature related to the composition of whale feces. He's an expert. We work with him. So we do know what the composition is, but what we haven't done, and this no one's done, is to really understand, if you are working with human feces, what kind of filtration and addition and balancing might you need to do to have it look like whale feces, right? How many steps would that take? How feasible is that in the ship? It should be feasible in theory, because we know both sides of that equation, but you need to get in the lab. You actually just need to do it and understand it. We can do that part on land. We need the ship, however, to actually think about, how would this actually, though, work in practice? In practice, you're on a ship. In practice, you have passengers with waste as well as food waste, which, by the way, might be even easier to work with, because it's not full of the normal human gut bacteria, right? It's food waste. It's the leftover food on your plate. When you are on a cruise, everybody's eating a lot. There's always leftover food in the kitchen and on people's plates. That's food waste. That's food waste that's also full of nutrients that could, again, be rebalanced, filtered, rebalanced to look like whale feces. So we want to play with both of these to see what is more feasible, what's safe for the ocean, what's practical, what's going to make an impact. And that's the important research we look forward to advancing. From a passenger perspective, it's really important, if you're going to make all the effort to go to these places, you have the full experience. So you'll see the penguins, the polar bears, all the things you would expect to see. I've been on many expedition cruises as a passenger. I know what you want to do and see when you're in these special places. We will not compromise on the experience. But as you're there, you're actually contributing to the science. And to the extent that you want to kind of watch that science in action, maybe part of your job is going out for the day and collecting some whale poop samples or otherwise. Who knows? Maybe that's your thing. You can go out and help with that, but you don't have to. And we hope to thereby offer everyone a great opportunity to have just an incredible expedition cruise experience, which everyone really should have. It's life-changing to be out in these places, but also to know that you're doing something good while you're doing it. And we didn't talk about, our expectations, but for any ship that we would be running, we will, of course, mitigate its impact. So this is very important in terms of how it its emissions and its impact on the environment. So our intention, being positive polar, is to have a net positive impact on the environment everywhere we travel, not just mitigate, but actually leave it better because we were there.
Oh, that's beautiful. How do you, how much difference does it make what people eat? I take, every now and then, I take krill oil because it has some of the things that are
Very good for you, right?
And
me too.
I've been told that I'm eating the breakfast of these whales, and I should stop doing that because I'm but I mean, there's so few whales anymore that it's hard to imagine that there's not enough krill for them and me too. Tell me, am I stealing
your small amount is not going to make a difference for the whales. It is true that the krill fisheries have been under some pressure. And when the krill fisheries are under pressure because there's not quite enough krill in a season, that is real impact on the whales and the penguins and the many other creatures that live on and need the krill. I don't advocate for humans not using krill. What I advocate for is let's increase the number of krill. Let's do that. Okay. Let's
How
not
do you do
fight
that?
over a small pie. Let's make the pie bigger. And we know how to do that. And that's
How?
another area of research that Dr. Savoca has led, which is, for example, just by shifting the krill season by just a couple of weeks in the Southern Ocean, you can allow the whales to have more time to get what they need to eat. So little changes where we can learn to live in harmony with the creatures there, as well as what we've talked about in terms of improving that base of the food chain, which increases krill. I think that we'll be able to turn this around. But there's some pressure, but I wouldn't advocate that you stop using krill oil.
What about, say, vegetarian passengers versus meat-eating passengers and krill-eating passengers? Do krill-consuming passengers contribute more to whale vitality than other folks?
You're
Yeah,
really
could be.
that's a fun
Could
thing
be.
to think
Yeah.
about. We're far
Yeah.
from knowing if we're going to have special diets on the cruise ship just to improve the science.
No.
I don't think
Yeah.
so. I don't think we will do
No.
that.
Yeah.
It's a fun
No. The idea is to make the two worlds thrive, right? So
Yes.
so the humans in connection with nature and the human activity also in connection. I'm also a krill oil eater, and I do take all day one pill of krill oil because it's good for the health, right? So the idea, as Jen was saying, is that we are going to create more biomass. That's the idea. There's a lack of biomass right now in the ocean, and that is what we are planning to do when we scale this. And that's what I said, that more cruise ships, expedition cruise ships, but also more ships in general, we applying our technology will be better for the environment because there's a lack of phytoplankton and a lack of biomass. So and that biomass, to your point, Meta, will also sink carbon, and that's how we are going to finally change the tendency. We have made our own calculations with scientists, and when we scale this, only because of just the merchant fleet to use our technology, we can, even the world producing right now the same amount of CO2, we are going to sink so much carbon that we can be able to change the tendency of what is happening right now and restore the environment to pre-industrial levels. That is what is our plan, and also producing a lot of other economical benefits. More wildlife into the ocean is more fisheries, more krill oil that you can eat, and all humans and nature to thrive together. So that is what we are planning to do.
So the krill also eat the phytoplankton. Is that right? And so
they eat the zooplankton. The zooplankton eat the phytoplankton. So it's a whole chain: phytoplankton, zooplankton, krill. Yeah, and whales.
Second one thing you mentioned.
Zooplankton is an animal, a little animal. Zooplankton,
like zoo plankton.
Say it again.
like zooplankton.
Spell it. What do you say, Jen? Spell it again.
Zooplankton. That's how I would say it. I think he's probably saying it right, but it's like zoo, ZOO.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a whole chain, right? There's phytoplankton, diatom, zooplankton, etc. It's a whole chain. It's a whole web, right? It's called a food web, and at the base of it is phytoplankton. That's the key. But ultimately, all the fish in the sea depend on what happens with the phytoplankton in various ways through this food web, including krill.
It's wonderful. Now, here's an extra thing that you could do that I bet you may have already heard about. But I told you that after I took my first big cruise around the Mediterranean and spent, a lot of time doing that, I felt guilty because I found out that actually cruise ships use bunker fuel, which contains sulfur, which turns out to be really bad for the environment. But a couple of years ago, or a few years ago recently, the International, I don't know what it's called, Maritime Organization or whatever.
Organization?
Yes.
Yeah, IMO.
Adopted a new rule that from now on, ships have to stop using that kind of fuel and use a more environmentally acceptable kind of fuel, which they did. Now, it turns out that was a good thing, but it was a bad thing because the ships were emitting pollutants into the air, which in killing people around the world, all the carbon, black carbon and whatnot. But when they took it out and replaced it with benign types of fuel, this had an extraordinary effect. Only now are they discovering that there's been a big jump in the global temperature, a big spike that they can't account for by other models. And it seems that what happened was that these ships were emitting materials, pollutants that create clouds or streams,
Yes.
white clouds behind them. You can see them from outer space, these little, lines across the ocean.
The albedo.
Yes. Now, what is required, it seems, for global warming to reduce global warming is a lot of clouds, because there's this thing called the albedo effect. That is the reflectivity of the clouds. Turns out that is just about as important. Some people even say more important than carbon dioxide, the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. So by having reducing the amount of white clouds over the ocean, they're reducing the reflectivity, and therefore just warming the planet, because the white clouds reflect more. So when they stopped the bunker fuel and replaced it with something more environmentally benign for health reasons, they unfortunately reduced the amount of white clouds. Okay, I've got a new assignment for you. On your ship, why don't you put on a big fan with some things that blow seawater, and you can replenish the clouds as you go along. And people are already doing that. There's an experiment that's been going on in near Australia over the Great Barrier Reef, where they have been reflecting clouds, putting up more clouds, whitening the clouds, so as to protect the coolness of the Great Barrier Reef and save the corals. It's not working very well because they can't do enough of it, but they've done some. And you could attach one of these big blowers onto your ship, and very little effort. Just take seawater and spray it, and it will make clouds, and you will contribute to the reflectivity of clouds, as well as reducing CO2 from the atmosphere and feeding the whales. How about it?
Yes, you are taking a very good point. We are already partnered with the people that is doing this in Australia. This is the Climate Foundation, the Dr. Brian von Hertzen. We are friends. And
Brian.
Yes.
He was on last week. I mean, we're very good.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So our idea is to do this marine cloud brining into our ship, obviously. Yes. This is something that also passengers will love, because they will just love to see that they are creating clouds after our wake, right? And you're right. When they take the sulfur, it's just one component. It's the sulfur. Mm-hmm. When we take the sulfur from the bunker fuel, that sulfur that was supposed to be toxic was really creating a very big benefit for the environment. It was kind of compensating the CO2, mm-hmm. right? Because the CO2 is a greenhouse, but because of the sulfur that was producing these ships, we were creating like more and more clouds. But now we have take out the sulfur, so right now we are in a dangerous, path, because right now we are still putting a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere, mm-hmm. but we have taken out the sulfur. Mm-hmm. So right now we are not compensated anymore, and it's exactly what is happening. And people can really picture this when you are seeing a plane. I'm also an naval aviator, so that's why I'm going to introduce you to that. When you see a plane, sometimes they create a little cloud after the wake, right? So that was exactly what was happening with ships, mm-hmm. in another scale, in a much more bigger scale. So that is what was happening, and the idea is to also do this and be one of the pioneers into do something commercially viable, because again, it has to be commercially viable, of marine cloud brining. And it seems to be that the sea salt, as you are saying, Meta, the sea salt can produce the same effect that the sulfur was doing. So yes, our plan is to also do that with our ship, and help to compensate the CO2 right now with producing more the albedo effect. Yes.
The man who was most responsible for promoting that marine cloud brightening was Dr. Stephen Salter, who died a year or two ago. And I was quite friendly with him when he was on the show several times. But he was working to develop a nozzle that would spray the seawater in just the right fineness. It has to be exactly very, very fine, and otherwise it won't whiten the clouds. So his game plan was to make just put up emissions of salt water that would be enough to whiten the existing clouds. He wasn't thinking of building more clouds. Now, I don't think that anybody so far has developed a nozzle that is perfect for that. So I think the whitening part may still have more research to be done before
yes
an adequate or a satisfactory nozzle. However, you can create some clouds that are already more or less white, and therefore you can, with the equipment now, just spraying. Probably if you take I'm making this up, but let's say I have a household fan, and I use that fan to disperse seawater. It's going to go up, and it's going to create some kinds of clouds, and that's really what we need. Just what has actually happened that I think was not understood until recently is that the simple amount of clouds over the planet has diminished over the past few years.
Yes,
And we
because
have to replace clouds, period. And then ideally, of course, the whiter the clouds, the better. And that can be developed too, although it may be, in my opinion, a separate project to develop the ideal nozzle for whitening the clouds. Anyway, if you could probably right now, just start spraying seawater, and it wouldn't cost anything. I mean, how much energy does it take to have a garden hose? Nothing. And you're on the ocean, so why not do it?
Yeah, well, it takes some energy, but yes, that's what I said. We are planning to do that also. Yeah, that's
really okay.
We're planning to do. Yeah,
because you could then advertise that as another way, maybe as important a way, although I don't know, of helping the climate change for the passengers that you're trying to get to buy tickets on your excursions.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes, because also it's also proved that the phytoplankton also did produce this albedo effect. Mm-hmm. This biomass that it was more before also did produce this albedo effect. So because of the lack of phytoplankton that we are living right now, there's less and less clouds also. Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of factors that we are having into the earth right now, and we are, because all of our theory and actions are going to be based in nature process. So that's why we are assimilating this process of marine cloud brining, because we also know that more phytoplankton did produce this also more clouds. So we are working in both sides, into the sea and into the atmosphere with the ship. That is what we are planning to do. Natural process is very important to always think natural process, yes, because to not be considered geoengineers, because we are because that's what we don't want to be considered geoengineers right now. We are just filling the gap of what is supposed to be there in in a healthy environment, in
Mhm.
healthy seas. Yes.
And also, the thing that the phytoplankton emit is some kind of chemical that gets into the atmosphere. It starts with a D, but it's a long word that I can't remember. Maybe even Jenn
Yeah.
knows what it's called. But at any rate, that is the the thing that comes out of this of the phytoplankton that is also important. You're right. So you are really on to something. I thought I was going to spring something on you hadn't thought about, but you and Brian have already got together and talked about this.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. We have thinking.
if you succeed, then you should be able to convince other shipping or go back to the International Maritime Organization and say, change your rules back, or change it not back to what it was, but recommend that people put a little blower on their ships. Every ship should have a blower on it, so when it goes through, it can spray. And also, they should be saving all of the waste products from the human beings on the ship and adding it to the water. You're confident
Exactly.
that there's no harm being done. Suppose you have, of course, you say you are a little worried about the bacteria, that you're worried that maybe you'll be contaminating the ocean with
All right,
human
well, we haven't,
bacteria.
this is the work. We're in the early stages of this work. To be clear, when no one's doing anything like this today, we need to first understand how you need to perform the filtration and quality control to ensure you do not introduce things into the ocean that should not be there, right? So whether that's bacteria or other mismatched nutrients or otherwise. Today, though, let's be clear, every ship is out there dumping food and human waste. They treat it to a supposedly somewhat inert status, and it's dumped into the ocean. It does no good for the ocean, and it can do and sometimes does harm. This is a recognized problem in the industry, but it's
Good.
happening every day. So there is dumping going on of food and human waste every day at sea after some treatment. Our proposal is to add another step or a different step to that treatment process so that when it goes into the ocean, it actually does good for the ocean
Mhm.
instead of harm to the ocean.
Mhm.
So we're not doing anything except making it better, but today it's already being dumped.
So
Okay.
you say that that there are occasions when the dumping of human waste has caused
Leads to
harm.
harmful algae
What kinds
blooms
of
and other issues. Yes.
what has it done? And can you think of a case, an instance?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. For example, in the Gulf of Mexico, you can see all of these random algae blooms, right?
Uh,
Because these components have minerals,
mhm,
and sometimes that minerals allows the not good type of of species to grow, right? Because it's just random minerals that are dead.
mhm,
It's only but those minerals are some species are taking advantage of that minerals and allow them to grow much more faster.
uh-huh.
The natural balance, disrupting the
And
natural
it's creating an imbalance. So in some seas you can see already this blooming of not the right type of biomass that you need, and producing a lot of harm into the biodiversity that should be there, because it's taking all of the oxygen and stopping the light to come to the bottom of the sea and everything, and also there's a lot of problems into the tourist area, into the beaches that humans like to be, right? And you can see this algae coming and coming,
Mhm.
and that's not good for the for the environment, and that's the harm that
My
sometimes.
previous assumption, and I think it's because of things I've read or been told, is that that's not because of human waste. That's because of the flow of fertilizer down the Mississippi River and other sources that go into the Gulf
Yes.
of Mexico. And the fertilizer is very harmful. But I
That's
don't.
one of the components. That's one of the components. The fertilizer are also, and you're right, it's also one of the components that are producing all of this random algae bloom. But also the ships as Jen said, they destroy everything, all of what is living there, but still have some minerals, right? So something there, and that is what also sometimes help other species to grow, but not the ones that should be growing, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're on top of it. Very good for you. That's wonderful. I wish I could say I'd love to take a cruise with you, but how long is it going to be before you start these expeditions?
Well, that's a very, very good question, and hopefully you will able to join us.
Well, I
we
don't
will love
leave
to
home
have you.
anymore. I'm 94, so I'm not much of a
Okay.
seagoer, but
you look very good. So our plan, we are raising funds right now very aggressively, so everyone can invest into our campaign, into our crowdfunding campaign.
it's called
But also,
Positive Polar, right?
yes,
That's
positivepolar.com.
And if they go to your a website, presumably they can
learn more. Yes, they can learn.
Yeah, they can learn, they can invest, and there's a button there they can invest and helping us. We're also looking for big investors, and hopefully we will do our first joint venture with a already running expedition cruise company, so we can start together into the Arctic soon. That's our
the
idea.
Arctic or the Antarctic?
Arctic first,
Really?
2026. Yes, in the Arctic 2026, that's our plan. And if we don't race in so fast, we should go to Antarctica. But we want to be into the sea as soon as possible, because as Jen was saying, this is a whole path that we have to go. There's a lot of phases, so we have to start as soon as possible. We think that we have the solution to the problem of lack of wildlife into the ocean, of lack of biomass, of really restore the environment. So we have to start as soon as possible, and that's the call of action. We are open to be supported by this investment. Anyone can support from $100, and so anyone can do it, and so we can start as soon as possible into this path, because it will not be immediate. It will take a lot of research. Could be 3, 4, 5 years. So that's why we need to start as soon as possible.
But now my notion of the Arctic is that there's, maybe I'm mistaken, but that's not really the place where the whales are the most numerous. I had the idea that the whales were off the coast of Chile and the waters close to Antarctica.
But the whales were everywhere around the world. As I said, sperm whales you can see sperm whales in the Caribbean Sea. We that swim with sperm whales with Jenn into Dominica, an island in the Caribbean Sea. So the whales were everywhere, but in the Arctic, yes, there was a lot of whales in the Arctic. That's why my ancestors didn't migrate, because they killed them all in the Arctic, and they go to Antarctica and the other places, right? But yeah, whales. They usually feed into the cold places. The ones that migrate, they feed into the polar regions, and then they migrate into the equator to breed, right? So yes, in both poles there were a lot of whales. It was not only the Antarctica, also in the Arctic.
Phytoplankton in the Arctic. I wasn't aware of that as a place where there's a significant deficiency of phytoplankton. Is that true? Yeah, the Arctic.
Yeah, the lack of phytoplankton is everywhere. It's not only Antarctica. You can see it's a phenomenon that's happening all around the world. Yeah.
Well, we've used up our time and then a little more. It's been fascinating, and I wish you every success. And I hope to follow what you're doing, and I'll no doubt get some reports from Brian, because I talked to him a lot. And this is
thank you.
Actually a wonderful project. And thank you so much. Let's stay in touch, okay?
I look forward.
Thank you very much, Meta. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.